Hey Robots, thank you again for joining me. Weathering effects today are my first project for the year, a Maschinen Krieger, Ma.K Rapoon with a Night Ops theme. My name is Linc and I worked as a studio artist in Japan and hope my tutorials instruct, inspire and motivate you with your own hobby projects. In this video let me take you through chipping, the Brown Worsh, LOPAR, the Flattening, Airbrush Weathering, GOFS and a special bonus section on the MK44 Ammo Night. Let's go. Number 1. The chipping. My theme for this suit is hyper-restrained weathering in a dusty environment. Let's tackle the chipping first so that they are also appropriately dusty. For Christmas I scored an entire set of these lovely Vallejo mecha colours, and I'm pretty keen to keep trying them out in different places. First I used their yellow on the ID bands and the paint over for the markings. It's not bad, I do quite like it. Next I want to try out their chipping colour. I feel I can learn a great deal about a paint range just by testing out their chipping colour. Much like you can size up a sushi joint by trying their egg. Yes, this is a famous expression in Japan. The sushi part, no, not the paint. That's just a Linc weirdness thing. The paint chart says that the mecha colour chipping matches up with model colour German camo brown, which if you watch my tutorials you'll know that's also one of my favourites for chipping. But no, not quite. It's much closer to their model colour chocolate brown. And if you're like me, you enjoy to know those kinds of things. I like some continuity between my paint ranges. Now, is this a good thing? To me, actually, yes. In fact, if you remember during my Warhammer 40k Stealth suit tutorial, I mentioned wanting a chipping colour with a touch more red, just to give it a bit of life and to work better with some fantasy aspects of science fiction. And this one actually comes much closer. So yeah, big thumbs up. Let's mix it up with a touch of model colour black to make a slight shade, and I'm using here a Stay Wet palette to keep it working for me. Today I'd like to show you a simple strategy to use if you are not yet confident of where to place chips. I often hear this when I visit shows. So let's use the effects, the results, from the chipping fluid to provide a kind of guide for us, and we will simply step in and augment with some depth. Some apparent depth, of course, because it's just painted on. This will instantly give us two flavors of chips, with some representing very light surface abrasion, it's just rubbed off some paint, and darker chips for deeper damage done to the armor, where it's kind of gouged in. Using a sharp pointy brush, this is a size 1 from the Leon Hardy range, I got it from my mates at Hobbyco, we're going to paint inside the chips. We don't need to exactly match the shape of the chip, we can leave some of the second color showing around the outside. We're simply looking to make an interesting shape inside the chip, keeping it slightly jagged and realistic looking. The best way to keep it realistic is to be very observant in your daily life. When you're cruising around and you see stuff that's a little bit beat up, has scratches and chips, check it out, take some photos and share it with us on our media and tag me. I love seeing different kinds of damage prone like that. For the Rapoon, I'm going to be ultra restrained, and you guys know that's really hard for me. I'm really reining myself back in, and I'm only going to pick a few of these chips out to do, leaving many as is from the chipping fluid result. Lastly, let's add a couple of manually painted chips in prominent areas. This one I don't need a guide, I'm going with my instinct and judgment and experience on this. This helps with our economy of effort, as they will add more to the overall look than labouring over the entire model for hours and hours, but also keep the look balanced yet interesting. And then we are done, probably the shortest and fastest chipping session of my career, and yet it still looks great. Mission accomplished. Very happy and proud. The Brown Worsh. When in doubt, Brown Worsh it out. Now here's another gag. I have lost count of the number of times I've been advised on the interwebs, that my model needs a Brown Worsh. I'm serious, and it's spelled W-O-R-S-H, Worsh. It's a classic technique, and for good reason. There are probably two safe washes that will work on almost any finish. Burnt umber and burnt umber green shade, if we're talking about the technical color. For these Abtelung paints, they have brand names for colors, and that would be Wash Brown and Industrial Earth respectively. I believe that we could also do it with some of the sci-fi named colors. Again, they're just brand names, and that would be Starship Bay Sludge and Starship Filth. Again, they're close enough and they're based on these classic colors. Keeping this very simple, I've made my Brown Worsh by dotting on wash brown and then dipping the brush in odorless thinners. Yes, it's really that simple. What I like about this is that we can vary our intensity and placement whilst it declutters our workspace. It fits my less but better philosophy perfectly. Coming around to the back of the legs, and I went heavier as I like to put gradients on my models, as you guys know. So this is an overall effect coming down from the lightest application on the top to the heaviest application for the bottom, for the back of the legs and the feet. LOPAR. Now first off, let me be very clear that I'm kidding around. Haven't you noticed that there are loads of folks out there adding names to stuff that's pretty straightforward? No, not just in modeling either, in all aspects of life. Being a hyper-aware type, this entertains me no end. There's a technique out there called OPR, oil paint rendering, and I like to think of this as it's using oil paints. Much like spongering and white fence brush technique, I'd like to invent my own name for using oil paints, and I think we can go with LOPAR. That would be Linc Oil Paint Advanced Rendering. Yes, advanced. Yeah, I'm kidding. But I promise. I just love how silly it sounds. LOPAR. It sounds like one of the dudes out of Big Trouble in Little China, don't you think? Now, oil paints are simply magical. No matter how many companies hype them up and add thinners to them, put them in little bottles, put them in mascara bottles, put the brushes in, all of which are interesting and fine, and they often do save time and effort, but still, they are oil paints, and they've been with us for as long as we've had notions of art. I don't think there's any right or wrong ways to use them. It's really our results that matter. I'd like to think of LOPAR as using the right method for the right time, for the right model, for the right result. I was actually serious in that part. Or in another way, it's just getting some oil paints out and painting them on your model. That's really all it is, and let's just make our stuff look cool. I kept it ultra simple on this one too, going with the restrained theme, of course. So I've only gone with a medium-sized choice of colors, a limited palette again. Adding them with a brush and then using that same brush dipped in odorless enamel thinner to create small washes, small localized washes. On other parts I've added them dry and then used a different soft brush to blend them into the surface. So I've shown similar things before, people have called it oil dot, etc., but you know, you don't need to do it to the whole model. You can just use it in localized areas to effect. I've then added darker colors to areas of mechanical effects and earthy, dusty tones to represent the environmental effects. Very cool, fun steps. I like this. I love this part of the process. The flattening. Now, you will often hear folks talking about sealing in their work with clear coats or top coats. I don't get it. Sure, if they are still wet oils, for example, you can spray lacquer clears over them, and that does in fact seal them in, but I rarely see it used in this way. I see folks sealing dried oil paints and other effects when they don't need to. Once they are dry, they are dry. That's what drying does. They are actually very durable when dry, and you can go right over the top with next steps. More oil paints, more washes, solvent-based washes, and yes, I do that all the time. Are you adding a protective top coat for rough handling, like gaming minis? Then fine, that makes sense and I agree. And I would suggest actually a lacquer-based one rather than acrylic, so that the finger oils don't degrade it over time. So what are you doing here, Linc? Well, here my oil paints have had a couple of days to dry, so they're dry. This would be fine to go as is, but look at it, it's still way too shiny to depict a dry, dusty finish. Enter the flattening. Oh, the flattening, Timmy, the flattening. Many flat varnishes require you to keep them pretty dry as you spray them on. But once again I found that you can just blast this stuff on this. What is it? Ammo Lucky Varnish Flat. And kablam, it dries flat. It's really too easy. The only downside I see is that being acrylic, we do need to let it sit around for at least say 24 hours. I was going to say a couple of hours, but no. You need to let it sit for 24 hours before using solvents on it. I solved this by continuing my work by staying with water-based acrylics, so I could keep working straight away. The rest of the steps that you'll see here, I basically did that in one sitting, the same sitting. Nice, right? Airbrush weathering. The Vallejo Mecha Colors set has a number of weathering products in it, and I was curious, and they downright full of enthusiasm to try them out. Yes, this is a gag from our Discord chat room the other day. As soon as somebody mispronounces the word enthusiasm in a tutorial, it immediately destroys all credibility they had previously built up with their audience. So yes, I am full of enthusiasm. Now the first one I wanted to kick off with was this, engine soot. And that's how it goes on. I really like this stuff. Finish is flat, it goes on like a transparent burnt sienna color. So it's mostly brown at the beginning with tail end notions of yellow. And slightly warm. Cool. I'll add this to the big book of good stuff to use again, for sure. There's 3 more in the box and they are named washes, but what the hey. We've got the airbrush all set up and ready to go, and they look pretty thin. Let's spray them on and see what happens. Yes, random experiments with unknown products with real consequences, because that's just how I roll. First off, oiled earth. It's just a basic light earth color, and I've still no clue. I've used it twice now, no idea why it's called oiled. I was expecting maybe a greasy or even a slightly gloss look, but no, it's dead flat. I sprayed it 50-50 with the Vallejo airbrush thinner, and it goes on fine, and it slightly adds to the flattening effect, so perfect for this kind of dry, dusty finish. Then a second round with their Desert Dust Wash, same again with the 50-50 mix. Last one was their light wash, I can't get it right. Last one was their light rust wash. And that was to add a little background to the 2 small areas I had added light rust effects to. So that's perfect for that. Nice, light and simple. Actually, I quite like these. They can be used as filters and for post-shade weathering effects like this. Not going to change the world overnight. They don't have the richness of oils, but they do add fine layers to our work and just happen to be perfect for this finish. It's almost like I planned it. Okay, I confess, I did have these in mind, but the timing was amazing. If they didn't show up, equally, we could have used highly thinned Tamiya acrylics for this, and I will actually do that on a future project as well. GOFS! Continuing on my little gag of making up names for stuff, it's time to add some GOFS, grease, oil, and fuel stains. Although I have this in one chapter, I did do it separately when I had the appropriate paints out. If you are pressed for time, you could skip this next oil paint section and go to the next steps after the flattening. Base coat. For all areas that will have GOFS, I've done a base wash of straight black oil paint. There's no hard rule for this, it was really dependent on the conditions of my brush. When it was loaded with thinners, I would add it to the oils to create a local wash, much like the weathering steps, and if there was no oil paint placed yet, I would unload the thinner that was on the brush to pre-wet the area, and then use the now drier brush to then place more oils. I hope that made sense. It sounds a little bit more complicated than it really is. You're basically just doing what's possible in that moment. See, the idea of them actually being separate steps to plod through, I feel is a bit of an oversimplification brought about by publishers requiring artists to fit our workflow into tutorial step-by-step photos for articles. In reality, I would imagine that most artists actually work much like I do. Or perhaps not, I really just don't know. But in the very least, I wanted to suggest this workflow to you as a possibility. If you prefer hard steps, then of course, work that way. If you prefer a flexible workflow that, in my personal opinion, well actually it's my professional opinion, it saves time and resources, then that's what I prefer. Please try it out and let me know your thoughts. this would be an opportunity for me to know more about how other people do it. Whether you go for a hard and fast step-by-step, or if you do it more as a rolling workflow. That would be very interesting to me. Thanks. You can also see that I used this opportunity to add some very light streaking. And again, this is part of my idea that it's not so much a separate step as much as an opportunity to be pounced on. So if you take one thing from this section, it's that I want to, I'd like to share with you that idea. I think in progressing from beginner to intermediate and then intermediate to advanced, it's not so much just what you know and the steps you work on, but also it's about building a workflow that works for you. I can show you a fair bit. If it works for you, that's great. If you need to tailor it to your workflow, then that's even better. Now the model is 99% finished and attached to the groundwork, having gone through rounds of chipping, Brown Worsh, LOPAR, and the flattening. So now at the end, let's tighten up with some GOFS. Grease, oil, and fuel stains. Let's work on the fuel cap here. Now we don't know that it's the fuel cap, but it's way more interesting to think that it is, so let's do it. We know that the mercenary forces are hard-working volunteers and they take pride in their work, but we can also imagine that they're overworked and under time pressure to get this equipment back out into the field to carry on the fight. I mean, they are at war, so sometimes mistakes and even downright sloppiness can occur. We can thank them for that and use them as weathering opportunities. As part of the mecha color set I received for Christmas, there are a few water-based acrylic weathering products still to try out. Today I will be testing out oil stains, fuel stains, and petrol spills, all three of which are gloss finishes. I've arranged them here on my palette from lightest to darkness, and we'll start off with fuel stains, which looks like a raw sienna type color. It's something I've always personally liked about Vallejo products. Because they're a proper art supplies manufacturer, they arrange their colors and products in ways that artists can understand. They don't just rely on, snappy product names. We don't need to use our best brushes for this task. This is a slightly older size 1 Leon Hardy from Hobbyco. It's a medium to high quality, hard-working sable brush. Mine's about 18 months old and I've used it for a lot of different things, so it's a really good value. Dipped it in water here so it's slightly damp. I'm applying fuel stains in downward vectors. I'm doing it in a tapping motion to get a feel for the paint, its consistency, and handling properties. This is a process I've used Tamiya enamels for in the past, and I can show that in future tutorials too if you'd like. I usually like to apply this effect in a couple of light coats to give it layers, depth, and texture. It's one of the unusual times that adding texture like this is something we want to do rather than avoid, and that's fun to me. Whilst letting my first layer dry, I'm coming back in with the second product and color, oil stains, and we'll be using this as a close wash to augment details and show where the thickest the oil will accumulate. I don't mind putting these effects on, a little heavy, and allowing gravity to help me out, just as it would in real life. I personally really enjoyed not being too tidy at this stage because in my mind I know that they're stains, so they're meant to be a tad rough and that will add a great deal of authenticity and realism to our finishes. Also feel free to add some streaks where the fuels could leak down, as you like and to your taste. Giving it 10 minutes to touch dry, I'll also add some of the petrol stains, product over the top in a couple of places. The blue-black color is super nifty and the added variance is appealing to me. Be careful not to cover up all of your previous work. Remember, we want to create layers and add interest. When adding streaks, make sure to add sound effects like this. Shung! I promise it really does help in both adding realism to the model and having a laugh as we work because, always keep in mind, this is about having fun. Last section, adding some nasty looking oily sludge coming out of the exhaust and engine area here. In the past I've done this with enamel based products such as Tamiya clears. Smoke is a good one for this. And then I started using oil stains from MiG Productions, and I've subsequently used all of the different brand versions of that, but they've all been pretty much the same stuff. Today, let's continue with our water-based acrylic theme and add some black pigment to the oil stains mix. It seems to be the thickest of the three, so will stick a little better and also give us a little more body and holding power. No surprises that they mix in easily. I've also used clear varnishes a bunch of times in the past to transport and bind pigments, and this is no different. It's really a tinted gloss varnish, so should be perfect. Mixed to taste, I've gone quite thick for the 1/20th scale here. I want to add it up under here. I just imagined that a bunch of grease, muck and other junk will accumulate up under the engine and seep out here and mix with dirt, soot and so on. You know, all that good stuff. Lay it on thick, wash out your brush with water leaving it damp and come back to shape the spill. Once I'm happy with the shape, I'm adding more of the chunky bits of the pigment mix to the thicker parts here to give it more apparent depth and thickness. That was it, and it dried like this. Pretty cool, right? Great to know, and a nice, easy and fume-free way to add this effect with water-based stuff. Cool. Okay, and there we have it, the video tutorials for the Rapoon series complete. Gunner, rounds complete. All acrylic, airbrushed finish with the restrained yet detailed and interesting weathered finish. Really hope you like it. I personally really like this one. I'm very happy with how it turned out. And I hope this one inspires and motivates you in your work too. Next project coming soon. Thanks as always, guys. See ya. Just as a little bonus, whilst I was off, I've added up some of those sort of features here to the MK44. You can see there on the insertion point, I painted the oil stains mixture over the top, and then did fuel stains around the bottom of the leg there to give it a bunch more life. Now this is my dusty side. Flipping him around. This is my oily side. You can see there on the joint on the hip covers. So that's oil stains and petrol stain. Same treatment on here, just slightly changed around. Give it a bit of grease and life because it's otherwise a very dry finish. And a little bit of fuel mix stain up there underneath that point. Wow, they're beautiful colors, aren't they? I love this. I think it's easily one of my best finishes ever. I probably milked it a little bit too much with the content, but what a model this has been for me. Really like it. Thank you very much, MK44. You've been a wonderful test piece. Much suffered. Big thanks to Hobbyco and Little Robot. I do my best to buy from and support local businesses to keep our money in our communities and to empower physical events. I get to meet you guys and hang out. Fun. Please allow me a moment to thank the very special people who are our top supporters. Ivan, MB, Grant, Con, Jack, RJ, Mr. Tweets, Robert, Kelso, Kevin, David, Derek, and let's welcome Matthias, Dominic, Peter, and Nicholas. This episode was supported by you. Your support empowers me and makes all this happen. Sincerely, thank you very much, guys. More soon.